Hey everyone, welcome to Central. My name is Perry Emmerich and I serve as the campus pastor on our Mesa campus of Central, the city where it all started. It's an incredible community of folks, and if you're in the area, I would love for you to join us in person sometime, as we would love to meet you. Or if you're in the area of any of our campuses, stop by and say hello. We would love to meet you. But wherever you're joining us today, we are so glad that you could be a part of our online service. Now, if you're new here today, we invite you to connect with us online by clicking one of the links, as we would love to meet you and send you a digital gift as a way of welcoming you and saying thank you for being here. Now, one of the best ways to stay connected to Central is through our app, available on all platforms. You can stream the service, take sermon notes, register for upcoming events, and stay up to date on all things Central. Download it today. Our mission is leading people to discover and fully own faith in Jesus. And one of the best ways we see people do that is through Rooted. It's a 10-week journey of connecting with God and with others. Now, there's few things I have personally seen that connect people better than the Rooted experience. I've seen groups that have been meeting for years discover things about each other and care for each other in ways they have never done before. And I've seen groups of strangers quickly break down walls and care for one another in a powerful way as they grow in their faith. And I invite you to experience that too. This year, you can experience Rooted in an online group or in an on-campus group, and the cost for our fall session is only $25. For more information and to register, check out our website. Now, another way people grow in their faith in Jesus is by giving. I was reminded again of a good friend of mine who has known Jesus his whole life. But until he really committed to giving, then his spiritual life really took off. You see, giving is a spiritual transaction that causes his kingdom to grow both in our hearts and across the world. So we invite you to give. And through that, see how God moves in your heart. You can give online or you can give through the app. Now, we're going to spend some time praising God together. Wherever you're joining us from today, we encourage you to clap, to sing, and to worship along with us.
Well, welcome, Central family, man. We are so glad that you are here joining us from wherever you may be. And just like Pastor Perry said, we're going to dive into a time of worship right now. We're actually going to start this set with a song that our worship team wrote during the summer series to remind us that our God is with us in every season. So will you join us as we sing that together? When darkness surrounds me, your peace it astounds me, your presence it comforts my soul. When battles are raging, the storm unrelenting, I hold to the promise you spoke. The war has already been won. Jesus
are the God of the promise. You've always been faithful. You've always been so, so good. I haven't forgotten that you are the God of the promise. You've always been faithful. You've always been so, so good. You've always been so, so good. Just so good. Wherever I am, you are there. Wherever I go, you'll be with me. Wherever I am, you are there. Wherever I go, you'll be with me. I won't be afraid of what the future holds. Wherever I go, you'll be with me. Say, hey, I don't know about you, but I feel a sense of comfort knowing that wherever I go, wherever I am, Jesus is right here with us. I love that. I also love the fact that we have a God who is a way maker. There's a lot of tough times right now, but God knew it. He's prepared for this. We just have to surrender ourselves to it and just thank Him for it. He's the way maker, the miracle worker, the promise keeper, light in the darkness. He's everything. Let's sing this song together. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper,
Well, no one strives to be the least. I would venture no one that has that as a life goal. There's no one that has that on their 5-year plan. There's no professional development course for how to become the least. My wife and I will often laugh that on every competition show out there, you will hear this quote from one of the competitors: "I didn't come here to lose, I came to win." As if someone's gonna say, yeah, I came to lose this one. Yet that's exactly what Jesus' goal was when he left heaven, his home, and he came here. You see, he came to assume the posture of the least, what many might define as losing. The divine became human, a servant of all, and suffered between two thieves on a cross. And what would compel him to do that? His love for you and his love for me, his love for all people. You see, while we were still sinners, he took our sin upon himself and he paid for it. And as followers of Jesus, we take time to remember that unmatchable act of love through communion, something Jesus himself asked us to do. We take bread that represents his body freely given for us, and the juice that represents his blood shed for the forgiveness of our sin. And we do this to remind ourselves regularly that it's not my goodness that earns salvation, it's his sacrifice. So if you prepare these elements at home, we invite you to take them now as we spend a moment to reflect on what he has done and how now he invites us to live.
I'm a stranger in a foreign land, passing through. When will I be home again? You remind me nothing here is permanent, but your word and your faithfulness. I was hungry, I was thirsty, weary, you let me in. When love became a refugee, he became my refuge. When love became the prisoner, he set me free. The widow and the orphan became the bride and children when he stole my heart between two thieves. That's when love became the least of these. I'm a beggar on the pilgrim's road, chasing echoes of a voice I hear among the poor. I'm a stranger in a foreign land. Oh, the memories of a love that calls the broken things to mend. When love became a refugee, he became my refuge. When love became the prisoner, he set
Well, hi, everybody. Hey, as I often do, I want to do right now, and that is welcome you, whether you are experiencing this online or whether you are on one of our campuses. Hey, it's so good to have you. Thanks for being a part of this. We are together experiencing the year 2020, and the year 2020 is unlike any other year we've experienced. I have a friend, Gene Apple. He made a statement. I heard him say this past week. I thought was so insightful. He said, when we look back on 2020, all of our lives are going to be defined by the year 2020. In other words, we're going to have our life before 2020, 2020, and then our life after 2020. That 2020 will be this great divide. And we know it's changing the life that we live. We know it's changing, the way we're doing life. And we don't know necessarily where that's going to go. But 2020 seemed to come out of nowhere. And the thing that makes 2020 so tough is it seems like it just never ends. There's always another thing. And so this week, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. Let's talk about a hurricane that's bearing down on the coast of Louisiana. This hurricane, they're describing it as it's unsurvivable, and that's such strong language, isn't it? Portends to such ominous thoughts. It's unsurvivable. Now, I would say that people would go, that's exactly what the year 2020. It's unsurvivable, and yet, folks, we're going to survive. We're going to get to the other side of this. And when you just feel like you can't take any more, then another national tragedy happens with this week, the shooting of Jacob Blake. And I don't have all the facts, and I don't know all the details, and neither do you. But here's what I do know, all right? This is a tragedy. It's like, do we need this? This is so incredibly sad what happened. Now, listen, I need you to understand something. This is somebody's son. This is somebody's father. This is somebody's friend. And I need you to understand when things like this happen, there needs to be a response from us. And it's not condemnation. It has to be some sense of, not apathy, but empathy, where we care, where we just go, folks, we have to mourn this. Listen, whenever anything like this happens, we have to understand our country is broken, and this affects all of us, and this is a very, very tragic thing. Now, listen, all people of color are our brothers and sisters. They are all of us. We are all made in the image of God. We're all children of God. And we've got to understand something. We share the human race. We share humanity. And folks, we got to care. And so we're going to pray about those two things at the conclusion of this time when I get done. But I want you to understand, we got to care. But this is what it feels like. It just feels like more and more just keeps coming at us and coming at us. And no, we're not thriving, but we say, I'm barely even surviving, and I can't take any more. Well, I think a lot of us would go, can I just have a do-over for this year? Can I just reboot the entire year? Can I just start over and give it another shot? And of course that can't happen. We go, can I get a timeout just so I can catch my breath? And again, I want to say there's no way. We just take what comes and we keep going and we keep going and we keep going. Now listen, I want to say something. Though we're not thriving, and maybe this is not the best of our life, I want to suggest that God is doing stuff in our lives right now that he would never be able to do otherwise. I believe that there's no other time in my life that I've seen more people come to faith in Jesus. I don't think I've ever seen a time when more people are open to the possibility that God is, and that he's alive, and that he's doing something. Now, why he's doing this and how this is, I don't understand all that. But I know that more Bibles are being sold than have been sold in years. I know something's going on. And I think God is redeeming the day. And I think if you just keep your eyes open, we're going to see that God was up to something, that in the midst of the storm, we couldn't see, but we're being changed and transformed. And my prayer, of course, is that it's more and more into the image that he wanted us to be. So to that end, we'll just take what comes. So we're in a series right now. We're calling it Love the Beyond. And we're talking about things that tend to stop us when it really comes to loving, limits that we hit, that we go, I'm not going to go any farther. And so in this series, as we've been working our way through it, we base it on a simple statement that Jesus made. A simple statement, a command, but a very difficult truth to absorb. And every week of the series, I've been taking us back to this verses, John 13, 34, and 35. Jesus said, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. You keep using that verse. And I talked in the first week about a pastor down in Argentina who preached the same sermon on that verse over and over and over. And he said, I'll stop preaching it when my church starts living it. And folks, this is something we need to understand. This is foundational to the Christian life. Jesus said there's going to be a way to prove that you're one of mine. Now, he did not say you're going to prove you're one of mine if you have the correct theology. He did not say but if you have the right tattoos. They're going to know you by your tattoos or your t-shirts or your Facebook posts. He didn't say they're going to know you by your, WWJD bracelets or your bumper stickers or your Christian jargon. He didn't say any of that. He said they're going to know you by the distinction of your love. And they will then know who I am, which means something important. They will know us by our love, or Jesus will go unknown. They're going to know us by our love, or Jesus is going to go unknown. And church, we got a decision to make. So it seems like this is an incredibly timely series. So in this series so far, there's a number of things that we've covered. We've talked about loving beyond. Number one, we talked about our fears. We talked about the fact that so many of us will go to a certain point, but we won't go beyond because we're afraid, and we use that to justify disobedience. God goes, no. Then the next week, we talked about loving beyond our differences. The idea that as long as you're like me and I like you and everything's alike, we're good, but don't ask me to cross that line. That won't get you very far. Last week, Caleb talked about loving beyond your comfort and the idea that you just got to get out and do some stuff that makes you uneasy, but God's got you. But you got to be willing to take the step. So far, so good. This is awesome. I don't think we've gotten a lot of pushback. People go, okay, I'm getting this. But today, what we're going to do is, I got to be honest with you, this message is going to be really candid with you, man. It's going to get a little more dangerous. So what I have here, I have a couple of things, symbols of what we're going to talk about. So I have a hard hat, protect my head. I've got a bulletproof vest, and I got a stick of dynamite. These represent the subject that we're going to talk about because, folks, it's explosive. It really is. And if there's ever a week, I'm okay that there's not a whole lot of people in the building with me. It would be this week because I would probably need one of these if it was. It's a topic that makes us really, really kind of uneasy and brings out maybe some of the worst of us. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, are you ready? Here it comes. Here it comes. Loving beyond our politics. And all of a sudden you start going, wait, what do you mean loving beyond our politics? Yeah, we're going to talk about loving beyond our politics. It's one of these things where, now I could say a number of ways we could talk about that line. We could say, some people would say this, okay, faith in God belongs over here and, politics belongs over there. And there's a line that separates and demarks the two. And we could talk about that. We could also say, no, somebody says, no, I should take all of my faith and just go run over here and you cross whatever lines politically and become as vocal as I can possibly be. And folks, that is not what I'm talking about in this message. What I'm talking about is loving beyond your politics, which is that line that when somebody sees politics differently than you do, where you don't shut them down and you don't shut yourself down, where you continue in a relationship and you continue in conversation, and you continue to learn. And so many of us go, that aisle thing, not on the other side. And I want to talk about that because I think it's really not doing us any favors in our lives. And I think we want to get beyond. Now, mixing faith and, the whole idea of faith and politics, it's kind of like mixing nitro and glycerin. You got to be a little bit careful, and so I will try to be a little bit careful. But I want to do this because I really do want to have more or less a family talk, and that's the nature of this message, a little bit different. And I just want to talk to you, church. I want to talk to you about the things that I really think we need to think about. And what I want to do, this is my prayer for this message, is that we pull ourselves up a little higher, okay? That we lift our view and we see something maybe we don't tend to see. Now, why in the world would we want to talk about politics in church? Let's just go there. Why talk about politics in church? And first reason would be because everything is now politicized. And if you're prone to take notes, I've got about 5 or 6 of these I want to suggest. Why are we talking? Because everything now is politicized. Everything, it seems like a good place to begin. Failure to acknowledge that everything is politicized means one of two things. You're either unaware or you're in denial. Everything around us is now politicized. It's just the world we're living in. I talked a couple of weeks back about the fact that the news is politicized. And folks, the pandemic is politicized. Not that it exists, but how big of a deal is it? It all depends on who you're listening to. Even the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, it's been politicized. You might know that it originally started off, it was kind of a Republican thing. It was like, yay, they're in our court. And then it kind of became a child of the Democratic Party. And you just kind of go, wait a minute, what's going on here? We could talk about the issues of racism and law enforcement, highly politicized. And we just talked about the tragedy of Jacob Blake. We could talk about the economy and discussions of the economy. Where's the economy going? What does it mean? Highly politicized. We honestly can't even talk about face masks without being political. Hey, if you wear one, if you don't wear one, what are you saying? What do you mean? Social distancing, the same sort of thing? Even whether or not a church should be open or it should be closed, it's politicized. Everything around us these days is politicized. We ignore this at our own peril. Here's a second reason why I think we should talk about politics in church, because the very nature and relevance of politics requires that we engage in the subject. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. The English word politics derives from a Greek word, and the Greek word is politika. Politika, it's literally, in Greek, it means the affairs of the city. The affairs of the city. The word polis, P-O-L-I-S, like Minneapolis, that is the word for city. That's the Greek word for city. So politika is the affairs of the city. So the question is, who should be concerned about the affairs of the city? Well, I would think maybe we should be, as well as others, that the church and people who attend church should be. In fact, I want to show you something. If you go in the Old Testament, when the Israelites were taken captive in Babylon, and they were held there much longer, years than they wanted to be. And God spoke through the prophet Jeremiah to the people in exile, and he said this: seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Now, I want you to stare at that for just a moment. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city. In other words, invest yourself in the city. Invest yourself in the affairs of the city. See, some people say Christians in politics should never. Okay, but hang on a second. If we're citizens of the city, we ought to have something to do with the involvement of what goes on in that city. And while we don't think of ourselves as exiles, I'm going to end this message by trying to explain to us that, yes, we are. We're more in exile than we know. But we ought to invest ourselves while we're here, because that's what God called us to do. Now, folks, we are not above involvement. We are not beyond involvement. We're called to be involved in the culture in which we live. Peter said it this way in 1 Peter 2. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. What? Submit ourselves to human authorities? Yeah, that's what the Bible teaches. That's what Scripture teaches. Now, how does this all work? It's a mystery, folks. I don't understand, but I do know that God uses governments to accomplish His will. He's not limited by, He's not confined by, He's not defined by, but He uses governments, and it's in His mystical way that He does that. I think so often in what's going on in the government and the world and politics around us is so much more than meets the eye. But it does not mean that God is not there. A third reason why I think we ought to talk about politics in church is because in politics, contempt has become both justified and normalized. We acknowledge, most of us acknowledge, that we are about to enter into the most contentious election cycle we've ever been in. Of course, we're already in it, but that the presidential election in the United States is going to be the most divisive, ugly thing that most of us have ever seen in our lifetime. We are bracing ourselves, just like we did for the hurricane, for the effect of the election and what it's going to do. Now, earlier in the summer, I interviewed Arthur Brooks, a professor from Harvard who wrote the book, Loving Your Enemies, and he talked about the issue of contempt, and he and I talked about that to some length. I want to remind you about what contempt is. Contempt is utter disgust for somebody else and somebody else's point of view. It seems these days it takes so little for us to hit that point of utter disgust. When somebody it's somebody of the other party says something, it is so distasteful to us, and we show it all over our face, and it comes out in our words and in our actions. Well, one recent study found that 15 to 20% of both Republicans and Democrats, ready for this, thought the country would be better off if large numbers of the opposing party just died. 15 to 20% of both parties, if the other large percentages would just die. And folks are trying to shove everybody out now. It's holding others in contempt. We treat those who disagree with us on political issues with contempt as though they were idiots, instead of holding others with respect. People who see a view, an issue, have a different point of view, see a different solution to a problem than you see, or see the problem differently than you might see it. And they have a solution they think is preferable or it's better. We've even gone so far that I've literally run into people who say that if you walk with God and you hold that point of view, whatever that is, they'll say this to people, then you cannot possibly actually be sincere in walking with God. Wow. C.S. Lewis, he said that, something all of us need are what he called second friends. He said second friends are, your first friends are all those people that you hang out and you get, and they get you and all that, and we have first friends. But he says second friends are a very special group of people. And he says second friends are those who you respect, but they disagree with you. They have a different point of view. They don't align. In fact, let me read you what he said about second friends. He said, a second friend has read all the right books, but it's got all the wrong things out of every one. It's as if he spoke your language, but he mispronounced it. He just doesn't quite get it. But here's what C.S. Lewis said. Get a second friend and listen to them and learn from them, because they can see what you can't see and they can say what you're not about to say. Now I want to take this a little bit further. It's gotten so bad that politicians are now afraid to be seen with each other if they're across the aisle. They don't want pictures taken, because what will happen is if they're seen having lunch with a person of the opposite party or having a conversation or with a smile on their face, then all of a sudden what will happen is that picture will get manipulated and will be used against the base, the financial base and the support base of that politician. So now they can't even hang out with one another for fear of what will be manipulated because of it. It reminds me of what happened to George Bush and Ellen DeGeneres. I don't know if you saw this. They ended up next to each other at a football game, and they were having a good time. They were talking, people were taking pictures and all this, and this thing went viral, and it blew up. And what blew up about it is that, can you believe they're talking to each other? And folks, they enjoyed the time together. Both of them stated that, but both of them paid dearly in their political base for the fact that they were talking to somebody who doesn't agree with them on everything. And what's really sad is when two people are enjoying a football game together and they're in harmony with each other and it bothers us, that's politics. That's what politics is. I'll tell you what really bothers me about this picture is that if you look at the caption, that was taken at a Cowboys game. That should bother you. They were at a Cowboys game. But it's redeemed because the Packers were beating the Cowboys when the picture was there. So we're all good, all right? We're all good. You know what the Word of God tells us if you're a believer? In fact, let me just show you, all right? We're going to go to the book of Colossians here. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Be very, very careful to not show contempt. Be very careful to not treat people with disrespect. Be very aware. Let me tell you another reason why I think we ought to talk about this in church, because fear is now overwhelming us. We are just being inundated with all these reasons we ought to be afraid. It's being weaponized now. Fear is being weaponized against us. And I want to say three things that fear does. I want to talk about this for just a moment. Three things fear does. Number one, fear motivates, man. You get somebody riled up, it'll get somebody to do what they wouldn't do otherwise. It'll motivate. Here's the second thing fear will do is it'll manipulate. People can figure out, I can get you motivated if I manipulate your emotions about something you ought to be afraid of, and they'll use fear as the means to get you moving. the direction they want you to go, feeling and saying the things they want you to say. And you know, the most sinister of all, though, is the third one. Fear monetizes. There's an industry, folks, that is literally geared to keep us divided. Division sells. These rifts and arguments and ugliness, all of this is marketable. It monetizes. A lot of people are making a lot of money over this. Folks, when our fears get the best of us, our wisdom gets the worst of us. We should talk about that. And then the one that honestly, why should we talk about it? This one right here. Because few issues threaten to divide or destroy the church more than politics. I want to ask you a question. Don't answer this, all right? Certainly don't answer this out loud. Was Jesus a Republican or was he a Democrat? Now, don't answer that. More than ever before in my lifetime, I'm watching something happen. Both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are courting the church. Like, I've never seen this before. Which in one sense is, it's a compliment, finally. You know, they're like realizing there's a lot of people who are involved, and yet what we're doing is we're taking Jesus and we're trying to divide Jesus between two political parties because both parties are claiming Jesus is for their agenda. And folks, this is a problem. Since having Jesus on your side can sway the outcome of an election, we got to get Jesus over there. And let me ask you a simple question. Again, don't answer it out loud. Which political party would Jesus join? Well, some people go, well, that's Pastor, that's easy. Okay, that's easy because Jesus was always right? Jesus was always right. And God was always right? Right. So right, Republican, right. People go, oh, that's ridiculous. Hey, no, when Jesus rode into Jerusalem and he was ready to pay like the ultimate price, what did he ride? He rode a donkey. And since a donkey is the sign of the Democratic Party, symbol, it's obviously he'd be a Democrat. And other people go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Jesus hung out with publicans and sinners. Publicans and sinners, that's really close to Republicans and sinners. And people go, what are you talking about? Jesus was a health dispensing medical miracle man who healed people and in charge of anything. He'd be a Democrat. And folks, we can go back and forth over this thing and it gets absolutely stupid and ridiculous. Here's what I know is that many people who love Jesus disagree politically. And that you can have a very sincere person who aligns himself with this party and another very sincere Christian who aligns himself with that party. And it's not the dividing line. It just simply isn't. But I do want to point out, let me just point out a simple concept. Just as the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, division is always the surest path to destruction. We talk about how nations rise and nations fall, but they fall from within. They begin to divide. Jesus, astute as always, picked that up. In Matthew, he said this: every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. Is it possible, folks, that what's happening here is that Satan is having a heyday with us, and he's using hatred that somehow has now become acceptable and justified to divide us so that he can conquer this incredible thing that we have and that we share? I could ask you, how much do you love the nation? And you might say, well, I love the nation a lot. In fact, ever since I was a little kid, can I remind you about something ever since you were a little kid? I want to put something up and see if you recognize this. Well, of course you recognize this. From the time we were little, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we still believe that? Are we still about that? We're creating now the divided states of America. We color code them. We talk about what happened in a civil war. We talk about the coast against the center. If I were Satan and I wanted to destroy a nation, how would I do it? Divide them from within. If I were Satan and I wanted to divide a church, how would I do it? Divide it from within. Listen, I only have a few moments left to finish this, so I want to just I want to take this somewhere. I want to propose something different. So again, it's Family Talk Church. Let me suggest that we do it differently. What if, instead of just going along with the status quo, what if we took a higher road? What if we took a higher road? And what if we took, like this verse right here, what if we took this and took it to heart? In Colossians 3, it says, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. What if we literally determined that I'm going to think higher, that I'm going to understand something is beyond what I can just see and experience here, that there's a greater, more important thing to pay attention to? What if we took a higher road? There's a second one. What if we celebrated the fact that our greatest citizenship was in heaven? You know it is. I mean, it's very clear in Philippians, our citizenship is in heaven. What does this mean? It means we have dual citizenship. You see, I'm a citizen of a country, as you are, but I'm also a citizen of a kingdom. I belong to heaven. When I gave my life to Jesus, he invited me into his kingdom. And his kingdom is not like the world. It has different values, but he invites us in, and he invites every one of us in. You're not limited. You don't get excluded. It's all in. You can get in. But you have to understand that the kingdom of heaven has different values that he expects us to live by. But what if instead of living by the earthly values that we're surrounded and inundated with, what if we turn that, and because we do that, and then we try to squeeze our way into heaven with all that junk? What if we turn that around? What if we said, you know what, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to live here, but I'm going to take all the values that I learned about the kingdom of heaven, and I'm going to let them dictate how I treat people here. Do you understand how much you would stand out, how different you would actually be? Which takes us to a third one. What if we took our role as ambassadors for Christ as our most noble assignment while here on earth? You see, I'm here. I'm only here temporarily. I believe that with all my heart. But I'm here because Jesus has literally commissioned me to do something, and that is to represent him, the sovereign one, in a land that I don't belong, I live in, but I don't belong to. But literally what I'm to do is I'm to invite people to his kingdom. And I represent him and his values, and I show people what he's all about. And that's what he wants for you and me to do. So the question is would I be willing to trade influence in his kingdom to have some earthly influence? So in other words, if I felt the need to get so amped up politically that I was literally shutting doors in people's faces and literally shutting down relationships because I had to be right, because this is what my party says, and then lost all the ability to influence them for that kingdom, would I have ever made a good exchange? Think about the fact that there are people around you who respect you until you go off on that. And then you lose your chance to influence them for a greater good, a more important thing, the kingdom of God. What if we took preserving the unity of the church as seriously as God does? You know he does, let me show you, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. See, all this infighting and all this arguing and all this stuff, you know, it's like kind of the way it's become. God never blesses that. He never says, that's what I wanted, that's what I want, you're doing it great. What if we cared as much about keeping, how would we do that? Oh, I got it. What if we made our church a politically neutral zone? What does that mean? Well, what that means is, what if when we came to church, we just took our voter ID cards and we checked them at the door and we said, not in here, not here. That in here, we understand something far more significant, something far higher is taking place than anything represented on a voter ID card. So what if we came in here and we just said, I'm going to give my word, I'm not going to get into this. You know, we do that. We do that on other things. Can I just point out, I don't mean to trivialize this, but you know, we do that with our football teams. Hey, I'm a Cardinals fan. Hey, I'm not. I'm a Cowboys fan. We don't get into a fight in church over that. We save that for the lobby. No. We don't get in a fight over that. We understand that's not as important as what we're in here dealing with. What if we took that same frame of mind instead of thinking that's the most important thing? Folks, we all have these kind of loyalties. What if we changed it? So here's what I want you to understand. Now, what I'm not saying is I'm never going to speak out on an issue that I think is a moral issue that I think God's calling me to address. I'm not saying I'll never speak about that, but here is what I am saying. Folks, I'll never endorse a candidate. I'll never tell you who to vote for, nor will this church. We're not here representing one party. We're here creating a bond between people who literally are learning how to love one another. And we're not here to divide. We're here to unite and bring people. I want people from every party to come in here and go, it's safe here. It's safe. And my promise to you, church, is we'll do everything to maintain that. And again, you can check us on that. So what about this upcoming election? Pastor, what do you advise we do? This is really not hard. I'd advise you to do just a handful of things. Number one, I would encourage you to do your homework. Investigate the different parties and the platforms. Investigate the candidates, investigate the past, and investigate their stands on things. And do your homework and understand what each of these stands for and what they represent. And then when you're getting all that, you're going to have a better understanding of what wisdom would dictate you do. And then as you go through all that work, I would encourage you with all of my heart, pray. God, what do you want me to do? What is the smart thing? What is the thing that you would have me? How should I go about this? Then I'd encourage you to vote. I'd encourage you to vote. Get out there and vote. Vote for the candidate that best represents the solution to the problem of our city as you think, is the best way out of it. Support that candidate. And then, after you vote, respect the process. And there's a lot of talk about this. Respect the process. But through it all, respect the person. Respect the candidate, respect the people who are different than you, who agree with you, who don't, who agree with you, respect the people who don't agree with you. Okay, now, here's what happens. Here's how fear gets used, and I'll close with this. Do you know what will happen? Do you know what will happen to the church if so-and-so gets voted in? This is how you hear it. Do you know what happened if so-and-so gets reelected? You know what? And all of a sudden, a scenario gets put before you. And the implication is if you're a part of this kingdom over here, the implication is that kingdom is going to suffer because so-and-so. And I want to suggest something to you. It's not going to happen that way. That regardless of who becomes the president of the United States, regardless of who gets voted in, whatever, regardless, that king still sits on his throne. And nothing that can happen on this terrestrial ball is going to change the celestial reality of who he is and what his reign is all about. Which means, if you understand it, it means he does not need any politician or any political system to accomplish his will or to see his way come to pass. He doesn't need it. He's not hoping so-and-so gets voted in. He's not working the election. He doesn't need it, folks. And I close with just this I'm going to ask you a simple question. For all the places on this planet right now, where on this planet is the church growing the fastest? Give you a second to think about that. Where is God doing more in a society than he's doing anywhere else right now? You ready for the answer? Fastest growing church in the world, Iran. It's in Iran. You go, Iran's primarily a Muslim country. Sure it is, yeah, it is. Church is growing faster there than anywhere else on the planet. God doesn't need political systems to do his will. He's not subject to them, he's above them. He calls us, be above this, be a part of a greater kingdom. So here's what we're going to do. I want us to pray, and I want us to do this. I want you to do this in your home if you're there, and I want us to do this on all of our campuses. So I'm going to stop talking right now. I'm going to hand this off to our campus pastor on the campus you're on. I'm going to plead with you, don't go. The most important thing, folks, the most important thing that we can do is we can lift up our prayers to God. And we're going to do that as a community, and we're going to do that before we leave. So let me just stop talking, hand it off to them, and they'll take it from here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Miller, and I am your online campus pastor here at Central Christian Church. Cal just gave an absolutely amazing message about loving people despite your differences, despite our political climate that we find ourselves in today. There is a lot going on in our country right now, and we want to have a family moment with you. At the online campus, we're going to do that on YouTube. And you can find that live video by going into the comments or into the chat wherever you are watching this video right now. There you'll find our live prayer conversation that will be going on right now. I can't wait to see you there, and I can't wait to join together as one people, as one church, to pray for what's going on in our country. I'll see you there.